So Tommy, when you hop into a Polestar, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Or when you hear Polestar, I guess maybe even.
To be completely transparent,
Mm-hmm.
Volvo.
Yes, exactly.
I hate to say it, but in my mind, it still is very associated with Volvo, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah. And it's funny because that's where I wanted to go, and I did not prompt Tommy at all, by the way, FYI. So it is so true. And this Polestar 2, though, the first time I drove a Polestar 2, and actually I think even more with this rear-wheel drive model and the dual motor model with the bigger motor in the back now, I keep thinking BMW, Volvo by BMW. Like if BMW was going to build a Volvo, this is how it would end up somehow.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of BMW driving characteristics in this car, like the weight to the steering and kind of the way it builds acceleration, especially with the two-motor setup. But I mean, what I think is interesting is the character difference between the single-motor Polestar 2 that we've been driving around today and the dual-motor, which we've also had some experience with. And especially, you know, this car, which is low to mid-50s, compared to that one, which is 70, there's a pretty big experience difference.
There is, yeah. But we should probably start with where Polestar is coming from, because what I also think is interesting is, have you noticed every Polestar presentation for the press, they talk Volvo? Because they're not the kind of company that seems to run away from it. They embrace it because it's a thing. And they're like, yep, this is how it works. Volvo owns half of us. We used to be a Volvo performance company. And this is our direction, this is Volvo's direction.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because they were closely associated with Volvo. Like you could do a V60 Polestar, right, for a while there, which is a high-performance version of a Volvo. But now, even though they still, at least in press briefings, talk about the sister company, when you interact with the company from the standpoint of let's go check out the website, let's go check out a showroom, they really don't have any overlap, right?
Right, yeah. And it's weird because I suppose you could say that AMG is kind of this same thing. They used to be a tuner, they were bought by the company, wrapped into it, there were AMG things, but then Mercedes hasn't spun off AMG as this whole separate brand. They've occasionally had their own models, but they don't have their own showrooms, and it's not that separate like this is.
So maybe you could answer some questions I have for you. Talk me through the buying process of a vehicle like this Polestar 2, right? Because you can't go to a Volvo dealership to sit in one and poke the buttons and test drive it. But is it as simple as placing the order online and having it show up like a Tesla experience? How does that work?
Yeah, it's somewhere between worlds. Polestar is Volvo's attempt at changing the dealer model and the customer interaction model, as well as being a more performance-oriented brand. So they've said that Polestar is going to be the performance vehicle brand, the one that focuses on handling and 0 to 60 times, etc. And the Volvos, you know, maybe there's going to be a 400 horsepower EX90. There's not going to be a 700 horsepower EX90. And we know that Polestar is going to go over 700 horsepower, right? So like this is where that crazy direction's going. But they also wanted to change the way the buying process works. So they're still dealers. They're Polestar spaces. They're not located near a traditional place. They're located in more trendy malls areas. They want to have a more boutique-like experience in that respect. And you can test drive them there. You can schedule the test drives on your phone, things like that. And then you can complete the buying process essentially entirely online. There's some things I believe that have to be signed, but they'll bring them to you, that kind of thing. So I haven't been through the purchase process myself, but on the organizational level, what's interesting is that Polestar space doesn't have a lot of 100 cars hanging out the back. Right. So they can't sit there and go like, hey, what's it going to take to get you in this car today?
There's no like squiggly armed man up front.
Exactly. So it's a classier experience that I like with flat pricing. It's like the price is what the price is. And how this works is you pick what you want. The Polestar space, if it has it in the 3 or 4 cars they have there, then that's great. You can get it today. If not, they pull it from the port. So they're all imported vehicles. They have the inventory for the entire country is hanging out somewhere, and then they will ship that thing from inventory to you, and hey presto, you have your Polestar.
Now let's talk a little bit about how they rolled product out, at least in the U.S., right? So the first car was a Polestar 1.
Yeah, and I was confused by that one.
Which was interesting because now Polestar is, of course, a fully electric brand. The 1 was this really beautiful, super expensive, bespoke coupe, but it was a hybrid.
Yes, super duper sexy though. I love the look of that thing.
Yeah, gorgeous car.
Yeah, and if anybody wants a pre-owned one with a 6-year, 100 unlimited mileage warranty, they're actually on the pre-owned list on Polestar's website now. But at any rate, So it's the Volvo history thing. Polestar started out as the Volvo performance brand. When they decided Polestar should be a thing, they initially pulled some Volvo things out and they turned them into Polestars. So the Polestar 1 started as the Volvo S90 Coupe project, so C90, whatever they were going to call it, which is why it looks so Volvo-like. That's definitely the most Volvo-like Polestar of them all, because it looks just like that concept. And this definitely looks an awful lot like the C40 concept that Volvo had as well. So this was a little bit further in development. They were able to Polestarify it more. Polestar 3 is the more complete expression of Polestarisms, and Polestar 4, 100% of its development, the entire thing was all Polestar, all from the beginning. It's not Volvo at all.
Right, and it is an interesting approach, right? That they're slowly kind of differentiating from their Volvo vehicle siblings. And let's take like the car we're sitting in now. The Polestar 2 shares underpinnings, like you said, with the XC40 Recharge, and then the coupe version of that as well. I mean, do you think that this vehicle differentiates itself enough from the Volvo versions?
I would say so. I mean, you look at Mini and BMW and Smart and Mercedes. I would argue that Mini is about as differentiated as this, and Smart is less differentiated in its current product line than Polestar is from their parent. But I don't think that the Volvo connection's a problem. It's like we clearly have very Volvo headrests here in the car, but we also have Volvo's really comfortable seats, which is a huge asset, right?
Yeah.
And more importantly than that, we have the fact that we have the nimbleness of this startup-like thing where Polestar's off doing their own jazz, but they can pull parts from a parts bin of cars that have been in production for a long time.
Right.
Like they're like, we can get a window switch, and we know the window switch works because we've been using it for 10 years, and it's a luxury car window switch.
Yeah, you're right. Well, what I like about Polestar 2 is they can kind of reinvent themselves beyond the maybe what I would call a traditional clientele that Volvo is associated with, right?
Yeah.
They can be more youthful, and they can use some funkier materials and have different price points and get away with it. And I think that's one thing Polestar has done well.
They can get away with this big sheet of glass that does not close off, which I'm not the biggest fan of. It's pretty sunny today, and I like the look of this, but I wish it was some sort of electrochromatic thing where you could dim it, or there was a power shade or something like that. But a lot of electric car fans definitely love this big open glass thing, and it does really give you a lot of headroom.
It does give you a lot of headroom. And this is, I'm very fortunate I get to do your job over at TFL, and I haven't spent a lot of time behind the wheel of Polestar cars, and I would say that your BMW-like driving experience is a pretty accurate description, and I mean that in the best of ways. This is a really fun car to drive.
Yeah, it's not a dig at all. It's Volvo has had their own way of tuning and designing a vehicle, suspension and dynamics, and they've said admittedly that they are not trying to be M. They're not trying to be AMG. They have their own specific tuning that their customer base likes, etc. But if you want something more Germanic and sportier and more direct, etc., then now we have this. So it does allow Volvo to actually have this split personality.
And what I was impressed was when we were driving this car and then also the dual motor with the performance pack up in the mountains, is just because you're getting the more affordable option doesn't mean you're really sacrificing that much when driving experience, right? The suspension was still tight, the power delivery was still more than accurate, the brakes were still excellent. So even the more entry-level vehicle is pretty fun to drive. Now, one thing, Alex, which I think is a very interesting move that Polestar did was their partnership with rental companies like Hertz.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And I see a lot of Polestar 2 rental cars in the fleet, in Denver.
I wonder if that's good or bad. I don't know.
What do you think that effect is on the brand and the image in the U.S.?
I'm unclear. There's some people definitely have this negative view of fleet sales and rental cars, but then Tesla is doing it, and it hasn't hurt Tesla. And you go to the Hertz, President Circle widget, and there's the Mercedes, the Audi, and the whatever there. There aren't as many though as there are Polestars. There are a lot of Polestars there.
There are a lot of Polestars. Now, would you consider this to be a luxury brand with where they're at today?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, luxury is an undefinable thing. Like what luxury is to you is not to someone else. But I would say pricing, positioning, materials quality. If Volvo is luxury, clearly Polestar is luxury.
Now, what about Tesla?
I would say Tesla
also
is,
a luxury brand?
I would say, yeah.
Now, this is an interesting discussion, which I see a lot of, especially in EV spheres, is a lot of people now aren't associating with Tesla with the luxury brand, especially now that you can get a Model 3, single motor for $40K, right?
Yet I would say, and the thing that strikes me funny about the Tesla's not a luxury brand thing is that it's assailed from both sides. The EV hater or the Tesla hater that's like, Tesla's not a real car company, they clearly can't be a luxury brand because they're whatever. And then it's the Tesla fanboy that's like, no, they're the accessible Toyota Camry alternative that's, whatever. And it's like, but it's not. They're expensive. And it's BMW 3 Series pricing for BMW 3 Series like sized car. And that's a luxury car, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, where do you consider the Polestar in this competitive set? So you got Model 3, BMW i4, right, on the upper end of the spectrum. What else would you consider to be a direct competitor with the Polestar 2?
Yeah, that's a little tricky for this vehicle, of course, because Polestar 2 is a size smaller than those, because this is a subcompact that's been stretched a bit here and there, so the back seat's not exactly big. So bearing that in mind, obviously Model 3, maybe the upcoming EQC that we all know is going to happen, that could be a logical competitor. It's not Porsche Taycan. Clearly, right? Even though Porsche Taycan is not actually much bigger inside than this, not the same kind of thing. This is a sporty but not performance-oriented EV in that way.
Well, and you said something interesting off camera a little bit earlier, right? Is if you look at this vehicle beyond just a liftback sedan, whatever you want to classify it as, if you compare it to maybe a Mach-E, right, or the Aria, then you're opening it up to a huge competitive set, which maybe isn't direct in line, but certainly people may be cross-shopping with.
Yeah, Q4 Sportback I think is a valid comparison because
that's a good one.
Yeah, we have about 7 inches of ground clearance in here, which is more than Mach-E gets in any version. I think even the upcoming Rally version is not going to be this high off the ground. But they definitely wanted this to look more sedan-like, even though it has that hatch in the rear.
Right. I mean, I think that from my initial impression on this car, right, one of the things which is strike me as being a really good attribute is the build quality. And the
it is really good.
It's super high, right? So much more than if you were to sit in a Model 3 or Model Y.
For sure.
The way everything is just screwed together and the solidity you get driving down the road.
And some of the seams, if you want to see more of the seams in detail, you can look at the full review on the regular channel, but like some of the way the interior parts go together, the design is not easy to assemble. So you can actually see, if you're really paying attention, if you're really a critic of assembly and design, then this definitely is built with precision. But you know what, I will admit that, but then on the other hand, I don't think Tesla's fit and finish quality, bad as it is actually a disqualifier, because if the customer doesn't care, and they've proven they don't, then it really is not a thing, right?
Right. And from a driving experience, I think that the solidity you get in this car is excellent. I think it drives great. I mean,
it doesn't have that firm and bouncy thing either.
No, it doesn't. It just, kind of irons out the bumps. The areas where I'm not so keen on are the new packaging of the single motor rear wheel drive versus the dual motor all wheel drive for 2024. Because they're doing some weird things with the battery and the charging.
Yes. But before we get to that, let's talk about the Polestar lineup, because we've talked about where they came from, and let's talk about where they're made and where they're going. Okay. So right now, controversy with Polestar 2, this is built in China. Okay. How do you feel about that?
To me, it's not particularly a big deal. I think that we're in such a globalized world at this point that where it's manufactured, if it's a quality product, to me that's not a huge deal. What is a big deal, though, and is actually a really important thing to take into consideration, is the tax credit availability.
Yes, I would agree. I'm right there with you. It's like, I don't personally care where it's built necessarily. I would prefer if it was built in North America.
Sure, right.
But the tax credit's the bigger thing. You will get it with the lease. So that's the Polestar 2. Polestar 3 is the next Polestar. That is going to be built in South Carolina. So that, I'm curious to see how the people that are anti-Polestar, anti-Chinese connection, etc., will feel about one that is actually built here in Merca. So that's coming down the pipeline. It's going to be built in the same factory as EX90 because it's related to the Volvo. It's basically the high-performance two-row EX90 targeted at Porsche Cayenne.
Right. And then let's talk a little bit about the upcoming cars beyond that, right? So
yeah.
Polestar 5 we saw previewed at Goodwood.
Or 4. It was 4. 4's coming.
Sorry, 4. Yeah.
Yep.
And then 5 is that's the sedan.
Yep.
Correct. And that's an interesting choice in my mind because, we've seen Ford move away from sedans altogether.
Right.
And the market it's still huge for sedans,
Yeah.
but it's getting smaller.
And have you noticed nothing in the Polestar future chart is boxy?
Yeah, which is also interesting.
Everything is sleek and sexy.
Yes.
So we have Polestar 3, sleek and sexy 2-row. It's the boxiest thing they'll build, apparently. And then Polestar 4 is an even sleeker SUV that's going to be less expensive. So number has no bearing on price. It's
Right.
simply release date. So 4 is going to be sleek and sexy, not related to a Volvo. That's going to have other relations inside the global conglomerate that owns most of Volvo and Polestar. And then 5 is going to come along. It's going to be a sedan, somewhat related to that. And then there's going to be 6, which is going to be a roadster, which looks cool.
And I love that as a car enthusiast. I love that they're branching into like these really high performance, low slung cars. From a business standpoint, why don't they just keep building big SUVs in 3 rows?
Yeah, I'm curious on that one too, and I'm wondering how that's going to go for them. The answer that is, as far as I've been able to divine, not official, mind you, but the answer as far as I've been able to divine is because their target is not Mercedes and BMW with Polestar. Polestar is targeted more at Porsche. And
Okay,
Porsche still
yeah.
has sleek, sexy things. So if you look at it and you look at the pricing trajectory, because Polestar 3 is not going to be cheap, Polestar 6, definitely not cheap.
Right.
That makes sense. Like Polestar 3, Porsche Cayenne, those are pricing sisters. X5's cheaper.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they're still pursuing, a car and then a sports car beyond that, which, like I said, from an enthusiast standpoint is great. But if
Yeah.
I put my buyer's hat on, kind of interesting. I mean, even like General Motors, right? All the future vehicles we've seen electrified have been Equinox, Blazer,
Exactly.
right? Cadillac.
Yeah. But we
So-
do have the Cadillac Celestiq is coming
Yeah,
up.
that's a good point.
Every
Yeah.
car company wants to have this thing.
So cars
And-
not completely dead.
Yeah, and on the Volvo side, we're getting EX90, boxy 3-row. We're getting EX30, boxy tiny 2-row. We're going to get an electric XC60 at some point, essentially. But Volvo hasn't said anything about sedans, which I'm kind of surprised by. We probably will see an electric S60 or S90 at some point, but it doesn't seem like there's as much buzz on that side for that.
No, I mean, I think it's important that Volvo and Polestar differentiate themselves a little bit more going forward. And do you think your average person off the street knows that there's a connection at all?
I am curious about that because on the outside, the last time we borrowed a Polestar 2, we had a lot of folks ask us, what is this crazy thing? And I was in a hotel for another event, and the valet had pulled it up, and there was this couple walking around the car, and the guy was absolutely convinced that this was BMW's new electric brand.
Wow.
Was absolutely positively convinced. And the wife was like, no, I thought I heard it was Mazda. And I was like, Mazda? Where did this come from? And then the husband was like, oh no, it's BMW's new electric thing. And I'm like, huh, like that's interesting. But
Yeah.
also good that no one's going like, is that General Motors, Chevy, whatever, right?
Sure, right.
So that's, I was kind of surprised by that.
And I think that if that connection is not made, then there's going to be even less of a chance that folks are going to understand or realize the Chinese connection.
Right. But there's advantage to the Volvo connection.
Huge advantage.
The software side, I would say, has a lot of potential, but it's a little bit lacking right now. Like, they have fixed this infotainment software by and large from my complaint set of it before. It's more fully fleshed out. We have YouTube, we have the Google Maps, etc. in there. But there are a few things where, for a software nimbleness standpoint, like, if we're going to be startup and we're going to be aggressive like Rivian and Tesla in developing software, they're between worlds. They're more aggressive than Mercedes and BMW in changing the software, but not Tesla.
Right. And I love the Google connection too. I mean, the ability to use Google Maps
Yeah.
in screen.
And the
without-
routing and the charge guessing is pretty easy there.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
if we pop in a destination in here that's far away, it does a really good job of estimating what our charge is going to be by the time we get there. So it's like, and it even pulls, like, we pulled up a list right here. Just I'll show you guys on the screen in a bit later. But it just pulled up the previous destinations, and right next to each one of them instantly tells you what it thinks your charge is going to be by the time you
Predict
get
the
there.
state of charge. Yeah.
Yeah, so it does a really good job about that. It also does a good job of telling you how long to charge for, all those things that Tesla owners are used to, but not every EV alternative has done a good job at.
Yeah, and they're pretty transparent with allowing you to play with settings. Like you can set your charge limit, right? You can set your max amps too on AC charging. You can see consumption on 2040, and I think it's 100-mile metrics. So certain EVs, right, they try to hide all that, right? They don't want the user thinking about consumption and about that. But Polestar does a nice job of giving you that data.
So let's get to the nitty-gritty. Like, what do you really think of Polestar? Like, what's your off-the-cuff impression of the brand and the vehicles as a whole and where they're going? Like, what's the direction here?
I'm really impressed. You know, I have to say, I think that the quality, and then there's definitely that mind towards safety, right, certainly comes through in these vehicles and the way they're engineered. And now the 2024, right, you got that new design front end that really emphasizes the sensors, right,
Yes,
to let folks know that this is a vehicle intended to keep you safe. I think that the pricing is a little steep in some areas, especially for a car like this where we still have relatively basic cloth seats, right? We don't have the Harman Kardon.
Yep.
I mean, people are going to be cross-shopping this with the rear-wheel drive Model 3s, and this car has equipped with, what, low 50s?
Yeah. I am surprised, though. They have sold fairly well. They've sold 150,000, they said, right, worldwide?
Yes,
and I checked, you know what, that is only 50,000 units less than the worldwide sales of the Chevy Bolt.
Wow.
And the Bolt is a relatively well-selling non-Tesla as far as all things considered.
It's a great metric.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I had to look that up today, and that is kind of impressive for something that, again, is kind of on the pricey side. My like fully fleshed out question, not necessarily thought, is it was very expensive to make Polestar a thing, right? Like this is the ultimate making fetch happen.
Totally. Yeah.
So for the billions of dollars that it's cost to set up, you know, a solid world-class international new luxury brand, wouldn't it have been cheaper just to build some electric Volvos? Am I just too cheap? Is that my thought? I mean, obviously you get the separate brand experience and all of that with Polestar, but they could also have just built like 5 more Volvos that were electric and had a whole Volvo electric portfolio.
That is interesting. But on the plus side, and one thing which is a big deal about this brand for me is I hate dealing with traditional car dealers.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to go in and haggle for my car and deal about markups. And theoretically, with the Polestar purchasing a situation, you would never have to do that.
That's right.
Which is a huge deal.
And that is kind of the inside baseball, I guess, answer in a way, is that Polestar has allowed Volvo and their parent company, Geely, to try and explore alternate franchise models and different ways of interacting with the customer that they could not do with Volvo. Like the way those franchise dealers and agreements work, that's just not possible on that side, and here it is. So you can have that different customer experience and explore with things that you couldn't with Volvo. So software updates happen here first. If it's a feature that works for Volvo, it will happen later with Volvo on the tech side.
I mean, I think the last thing I would say is we're entering a really interesting time in the EV world where up until this point, manufacturers could really push the bounds in a big way about like, look, this Tesla goes 0 to 60 in 5 seconds and 3 seconds and then 1.9, and then you have manufacturers, well, we just hit 300 kW of charging, right? And every year there was like these metrics being broken. Well, we're seeing a lot of small incremental improvements, but now these manufacturers can't rely on the biggest charging number or the fast acceleration. So they have to differentiate themselves like they do with internal combustion about like, well, comfort and design and feature spec and where it fits in the market and pricing. And that's going to be really interesting. And it's going to be a lot of kind of growing pains, I think, for a lot of these major OEMs.
And I am intrigued that Polestar has used the same sort of engineering philosophy that we've seen at Volvo for a while for their updates, because since the Polestar 2 launched, there have been some pretty significant mechanical changes that instead of waiting for a model cycle refresh, Polestar just has changed every year. Like they were like, oh, people want a single motor model, let's just put a motor in the front. And then that lasted a hot second, and they're like, you know what, let's just put new motors in everything and put the single motor in the back. And let's stick a new battery in there. And so, I mean, there is kind of an interesting, I would say that's probably going to generate more enthusiast interest and brand dedication because of that nimbleness and change. And it's more Tesla-like. I hate to keep saying that, but you know, it is more Tesla-like than what we find at BMW and Mercedes, where it's like, oh, the new motor's coming, the new battery's coming, it'll be there at the next refresh.
Yeah, you're right. Well, Alex, I really appreciate you letting me come on and kind of do this chat. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, so let us know down there in the comment section below. Should we do this all the time? I was thinking like we could just grab random people at launch events and say, hey, what do you think about so-and-so?
That's a fun idea.
Yeah, let us know down there in the comment section below, and see all of you later. And of course, check out the TFLs, because, you know, he forgot to plug his own channel.
I did, yeah. Check out alltfl.com. Thank you, Alex.
All the TFLs
plug.
except for TFL floats. Still no TFL floats.
Really pushing the boat thing.
Really pushing the boat thing, because, you know, if anybody could do a TFL floats, it'd be the TFLs that do the other TFLs.
Well, thank you, Alex. I appreciate that.
See all of you later.